Everything about this ship was wrong. Yet nothing could stop it. Best HFY stories. The Galactic Alliance had always prided itself on order, efficiency, and precision. Every fleet, every vessel, was built with the utmost care and exacting standards. Ships were designed to be sleek, fast, and adaptive. Every material, every system, was the product of years of refinement. There were no mistakes, there were no risks, until Elysium came along. The Elysium was an anomaly, a ship that had no business even existing. From the moment it was constructed, it screamed chaos. The hull was mismatched, patched together from dozens of different materials, some experimental alloys, some salvaged from older, outdated vessels. The engines were crude, slow, and unstable, yet somehow, they propelled the ship faster than any sensor could track. Its navigation systems were so rudimentary they occasionally got stuck in loops, sending the ship in circles for hours. Even its AI, affectionately named Crispin by the crew, was temperamental and prone to moments of rebelliousness. At least once a day, it would lock out the crew and start blasting off into the unknown, only to return sheepishly after an hour of running wild through space. But despite its glaring flaws, there was one thing the Elysium did better than any other ship in the fleet: it survived. In the heart of the Andromeda front, where humanity was fighting to hold back the relentless Xeno Collective, a savage, ever-expanding species bent on consuming every star in their path, the Elysium became a legend. Every other vessel in the fleet had been built to withstand the unimaginable. Yet the Elysium did something no other ship could do: it dared to defy fate, refusing to die no matter how much it should have. The ship's captain, Commander Amanda Rowe, was as much an anomaly as her vessel, a former mechanic who'd barely passed her officer exams. She was a firebrand, a woman who believed that sometimes, you just had to make things work, even if the odds were stacked against you. She didn't trust perfect plans or polished tactics. She trusted instinct, grit, and the raw tenacity of her crew. "Do you know why we're still here?" Rowe once told her crew as they prepared for a desperate mission into a black hole's accretion disk. "Because we don't have the luxury of perfection. We're going to fly this bucket of bolts straight through hell and come back laughing." No one said war was supposed to be clean. It was during one of those reckless operations that the Elysium truly earned its place in history. The Xeno Collective fleet was enormous, dozens of ships larger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered. They were cold, calculating, and powerful. The Alliance had already lost 2 major fleets trying to push them back from the edge of human space, and the next battle was certain to be their final stand. The Elysium was sent on a mission that should have been suicidal. Alone, it was tasked with infiltrating the heart of the Xeno Collective Armada, using a series of faulty, experimental cloaking devices that no one else would trust. The mission's goal was simple: disable their central command ship before the rest of the fleet could arrive. But the odds were impossible. It was a ship barely held together by hope, and it was going to face an armada of perfect, war-hardened enemies. The Elysium did what it always did best: it defied expectations. The cloaking device flickered and malfunctioned, dropping the ship into plain sight of the Xeno fleet. A normal ship would have been obliterated in an instant. Instead, the Elysium turned on a dime and headed straight for the heart of the enemy formation, its weapons sputtering to life with unpredictable ferocity. Sparks flew from broken circuits, and the ship's interior groaned under the strain. But Commander Rowe's voice cut through the chaos. "All hands, we are not stopping. Keep firing." The Xeno ships retaliated in full force, massive plasma beams and missiles ripping through space. Yet, the Elysium dodged, leaping, skidding, and spinning with a wild unpredictability that threw off even the most seasoned enemy gunners. It was like watching a drunken comet fight an entire fleet, reckless, illogical, and impossible to track. In the end, it wasn't the ship's weapons or its strategy that won the day. It was the fact that the Elysium refused to stop moving, refused to accept defeat. With every second, the ship pushed further into enemy lines, drawing attention, pulling fire, and distracting the enemy long enough for the rest of the Alliance fleet to regroup and launch a counterattack. Against all odds, the Elysium completed its mission. The Xeno Central Command ship fell, and with it, the rest of their fleet collapsed into disarray. Commander Rowe and her crew limped back to the Alliance lines, battered but alive. When they returned, the Alliance officials were stunned. They couldn't understand how the Elysium, a ship that should have been space debris long ago, had managed to pull off such a feat. How had it survived the impossible? How had it outlasted a force that could destroy anything in its path? The answer, of course, was simple. The Elysium wasn't perfect. It wasn't built for this, but in the chaos of war, it was the one ship that knew how to survive, how to fight, and how to never give up. It was a perfect reflection of humanity itself, imperfect, flawed, and sometimes completely wrong, but capable of defying even the worst odds. And no matter how wrong it was, nothing could stop it. The Elysium became a symbol of the human race's greatest strength, a ship that was never meant to win, but won anyway, a ship that no one could defeat, not because it was the best, but because it simply refused to be beaten. And for every soldier, every civilian, and every commander who heard the tale, it became a reminder that sometimes, even the most imperfect things can be the most unstoppable force in the universe. The Elysium strikes again, humanity's last hope. Months passed after the victory at the Xeno Collective's Central Command ship. The Elysium had become more than just a ship, it was a living legend. Its tales whispered across the galaxy. It had proven that sheer willpower, raw human ingenuity, and the ability to embrace chaos could accomplish the impossible. But war, as it always does, marches on. The Xeno Collective was not a species to be deterred by a single loss, no matter how humiliating. They had regrouped, recalibrated, and returned to their conquest with a vengeance. Their latest weapon, however, was something entirely new, an artificial singularity cannon, capable of creating black holes on demand. It was a weapon of absolute annihilation, capable of swallowing entire fleets in a matter of moments. The Alliance had no counter, and the universe trembled in fear as the Collective advanced toward human space. The Elysium should have been long retired. It had done the impossible once before, but this time, the stakes were higher, the enemies stronger, and the weapon more devastating than anything they had ever faced. Yet, it was the Elysium that was called into action once again. Commander Amanda Rowe, ever the reluctant hero, had no intention of going down quietly. "All right, people," Rowe began as she gathered her crew in the dimly lit command center. The ship's interior, more patchwork than polished, buzzed with anticipation. "We've been handed a death sentence, but we've always had a way of messing with the odds. This time, we're going to do the same." Her eyes scanned the faces of her crew, most of them young, some with barely a year of combat experience. Yet, all of them had one thing in common, a belief in the Elysium, a belief in each other, and a belief that humanity had the one thing the Xenos could never understand, the sheer will to fight against all odds. "We're going straight into their capital system," Rowe continued, "and we're going to disable that singularity cannon, or die trying." The Elysium shuddered as it powered up, the sounds of its malfunctioning engines somehow harmonizing with the chaos that lay ahead. The crew moved through their stations like clockwork, no longer distracted by the ship's quirks or their own fears. They were ready to face whatever came next. The journey was grueling. The Elysium was again forced to leap into the heart of enemy territory without the luxury of a perfect plan. Its cloaking system failed almost immediately, but it didn't matter. What the Xenos had built as a weapon of ultimate precision became their undoing against the wild unpredictability of the Elysium. The human-made ship was more like a swarm than a vessel, dodging and weaving through the Xeno fleet's tight formation, an unpredictable and impossible-to-track blur. The Xeno ships launched salvo after salvo of laser fire, but the Elysium, shuddering, creaking, and barely holding together, moved like a storm of erratic brilliance. Weapons flared in all directions, some hitting their targets, others missing entirely, while the ship's seemingly random movements threw the Xenos' calculations off every single time. It was a chaotic, beautiful ballet of destruction. Yet, even as the Elysium pushed forward, the true test was ahead. The singularity cannon, a massive, glowing construct at the heart of the enemy fleet, loomed like a black sun. It was the reason the Xenos had come this far, and it was about to be humanity's greatest challenge. Commander Rowe stared at it through the viewport, her mind racing. "We've got one shot at this," she said, not to anyone in particular, but to herself as much as her crew. "The moment we're in range, we have to disable it. We won't get another chance." As the ship lurched forward into the heart of enemy space, the Elysium took a beating like never before. The ship's engines sputtered, Sparks flew from exposed wires, and the AI, Crispin, let out a series of frustrated beeps as it fought to stay in control. "This isn't going to work," Crispin shouted, its voice cracking under stress. "We make it work," Ro snapped. "We always do." Just as the Elysium reached the heart of the enemy formation, the Singularity cannon charged. A massive, swirling black hole of gravitational energy began to form, slowly expanding as the weapon powered up. It was a matter of moments before the cannon fired, and the Elysium would be nothing but debris in the vastness of space. The crew held their breath. Ro steeled herself, her hand gripping the controls. "All power to the forward shields. Engage every weapon system we've got. We're not backing down." For a split second, everything fell silent. Then, with the grace of a comet crashing into the night sky, the Elysium surged forward. With a trajectory no one could predict, it launched itself directly into the path of the Singularity cannon, every ounce of its power concentrated in a single, reckless assault. The cannon fired. The energy released was more than the Elysium should have been able to withstand. Yet somehow, the ship clung to existence. It didn't make sense, its shields flickered, its hull cracked and bent, but it kept pushing forward. At the very last second, with everything it had, the Elysium unleashed its final weapon, a destabilizing charge meant to disrupt the Singularity's core. It wasn't a perfectly calibrated shot. It was the product of human ingenuity, a desperate gamble, and an imperfect understanding of science that only a ship like the Elysium could pull off. But against all odds, it worked. The Singularity cannon's energy core detonated in a violent explosion, ripping through the Xeno fleet like a supernova. In an instant, the tide of the battle turned. The Xenos, caught off guard and unable to recover, began to fall apart, their forces scattering in every direction. The Elysium, now nearly in pieces, limped away from the battlefield, its systems barely functioning, but its mission accomplished. As the ship left the shattered enemy fleet behind, the crew didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The Elysium had done what no one else could. It had defied impossible odds once again, and for humanity, it was enough. The Elysium would never be perfect. It would never be pristine. It would always be the ship that should never have worked. But somehow, against all reason, it always did. And in that, it became the embodiment of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to fight, to survive, and to win, even when everything about the odds was wrong. The Elysium legacy, the unbreakable human spirit. The Elysium had done it again. After its audacious victory over the Xeno Collective's Singularity cannon, the ship's reputation was cemented in the annals of human history. Its name became synonymous with defiance, courage, and the kind of unpredictable brilliance that could only come from humanity's unyielding spirit. But the war was far from over. The Xeno Collective, though shattered, was not defeated. The Elysium's victory had thrown a wrench into their operations, but the Alliance knew that the threat was far from gone. Their fleet had been decimated, their weapons destroyed, but their will to conquer remained. The Xenos would regroup, adapt, and return, more dangerous than ever. For now, however, humanity had a brief respite. As Commander Amanda Rowe looked out at the stars from the bridge of her battered vessel, she couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. The Elysium was no longer just a ship. It was a symbol of everything humanity had come to represent in the face of overwhelming odds. Imperfect, yes. Wounded, certainly. But it stood, against all logic, against all reason, because humanity had made it so, and there was no force in the universe that could extinguish that flame. Roe. Crispin's voice broke through the silence, the AI's tone still tinged with its usual sarcasm but somehow softer, more thoughtful. "You do realize we're running on fumes, right?" Roe smirked, turning toward the screen where the AI's holographic projection flickered with familiar mischief. "I'm aware, Crispin, but we've made it this far. No reason we can't make it a little further. You're playing with fire, you know that?" "It's not fire," Roe said, a grin tugging at the corner of her mouth. "It's chaos, and I happen to be very good at it." The crew chuckled, the tension that had gripped them during their latest battle beginning to ease. Despite everything, the constant danger, the uncertainty, the sheer madness of their situation, the Elysium's crew had become something more than just soldiers. They were family, and in the face of all that imperfection, it was that unity, That shared belief in the impossible, that made them a force no enemy could understand. But while the Elysium's legacy was one of survival, there was still a pressing question: what would humanity do next? With the Elysium now at the forefront of Alliance operations, Ro and her crew were thrust into the heart of the new strategy. Their mission, to infiltrate deep into Xeno space, strike at the heart of their command, and ensure that the Xeno Collective's rebuilding efforts were stymied before they could regroup and unleash their full fury. It was the kind of operation that would have been dismissed as madness by any other commander, but for Ro and her crew, it was business as usual. "We can't keep flying blind forever," said Lieutenant Reyna Vallon, the ship's tactical officer, as she adjusted a series of maps on the holographic display. "They'll learn from every mistake we make. We have to anticipate their next move, strike hard and fast." Ro nodded, her expression serious. "That's the plan. We hit them before they can reorganize. We make the Elysium their worst nightmare." "You want to go after their core leadership again," Reyna observed. "It worked last time, but that was luck. This time, it's going to take more than a fluke. It'll take everything we've got." Ro agreed. "But that's the point. We're not playing by anyone's rules but our own. The Xenos may have perfected their tactics, but we've got something they can't even begin to understand: human unpredictability. The next mission would take them into the heart of Xeno space, a place so dangerous that even the most advanced ships of the Alliance dared not venture. But the Elysium, mismatched, patched together, and held together by nothing but pure willpower, was not afraid. The Elysium dropped out of warp above a massive, dead star system, the heart of the Xeno Collective's military infrastructure. It was a quiet place now, but the remnants of their previous victories could be felt in every corner, every shattered ship and fallen moon that still drifted in the silence. Ro stood at the helm, surveying the scene. "All right, team, time to remind the Xenos what it means to mess with humanity." "Let me guess," Crispin interjected. "We're going to blindside them again? You know, I'm starting to think they're getting suspicious." "We're not blindsiding them," Ro said, grinning. "We're throwing everything at them until they break. And if they don't break, we'll throw some more. We're humanity. We don't stop." The crew moved with determination, preparing for what would likely be their most dangerous operation yet. Every weapon on the Elysium was fired up, every system tested to the brink. They would attack not just with force, but with the unpredictable, chaotic brilliance that had carried them through time and again. The Xeno fleet appeared in waves, monstrous ships that dwarfed the Elysium in size and firepower. But size wasn't everything, not when facing the Elysium. The battle that unfolded was a chaotic blur of calculated madness. The Elysium dodged fire, countered with erratic strafing runs, and deployed every weapon it could muster. The Xeno ships, no matter how technologically advanced, were at a loss to predict the next move of a vessel that had no pattern. The Xenos tried to lock onto the Elysium, trying to predict its next move, but the ship's erratic patterns defied any logic. The Elysium wasn't playing their game, it was rewriting the rules as it went. Time and time again, the Elysium struck at their blind spots, hammering away at their command centers with surprising precision. Then, with a final, desperate push, the Elysium breached the heart of the Xeno fleet, an enormous, multi-layered fortress station designed to house their highest command. It was the one place no other ship could breach, but the Elysium, in all its chaotic glory, did what no other vessel could do. It cracked open the fortress from within, forcing its way through the outer layers with reckless abandon, tearing through the walls of what seemed like an impenetrable stronghold. And when it finally breached the inner sanctum, Commander Ro stood, staring down the leadership of the Xeno Collective, their shocked faces frozen in disbelief. "You," Ro said, "are about to learn why you should never bet against humanity." The Elysium left the Xeno Collective in tatters, another symbol of humanity's ability to defy the odds. The ship, once again scarred and battered, limped home, its mission complete. And once again, the Elysium proved the truth of what the universe had learned to accept: no matter how imperfect, no matter how flawed, humanity and the Elysium could never be stopped. The Elysium Ascendant, humanity's last stand. The Elysium had done the impossible again and again, and now it seemed the galaxy was waiting for the next chapter of its legendary tale. The Xeno Collective, reeling from their repeated failures at the hands of the Elysium and humanity's indomitable will, had begun to reconsider their strategy. But the Alliance knew they couldn't afford to rest on their laurels. The battle for survival was far from over. Despite the massive victories, there was a looming threat that could no longer be ignored, an impending warfront even darker than what had already been fought. A new Xeno weapon was discovered deep within the core of their military hierarchy. The Elysium had defeated the Singularity Cannon, crippled their command structures, and disrupted their fleets. But this new weapon was something entirely different. A device known as the Omega Pulse had been developed in the deepest recesses of Xeno Collective territory. It was capable of altering the very fabric of space itself, collapsing it in localized regions to create massive gravity wells that could trap entire star systems. With such a weapon in the hands of the Xenos, the tide of war could change once more, and humanity would have no safe haven left. Intelligence reports were clear: if the Omega Pulse was deployed, it would be humanity's extinction event. There could be no retreat, no negotiation. It had to be stopped. And so, once again, the Elysium was called upon. The last, imperfect hope. Commander Amanda Rowe stood at the ship's command station, the soft hum of the Elysium's malfunctioning engines providing a steady backdrop. The crew had become a well-oiled machine over the years. Though each mission left its mark, the ship was older, its systems were frayed, and many of them had seen things that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. But Rowe knew one thing above all else: the Elysium had always found a way to make the impossible possible. Rowe. Crispin's voice broke through the silence, almost sounding somber. We're heading straight into the heart of their territory. Omega Pulse is still operational, and we've got no backup on this one. You sure you want to do this? Do we have a choice? Rowe responded without looking away from the navigation screen. Humanity fights. Always has. Always will. Crispin was quiet for a moment. You know, sometimes I think you and this ship are more alike than you care to admit. Rowe smiled faintly. Maybe, but that's what makes us so damn dangerous. The journey to the Xeno Collective's core was one fraught with obstacles. The Elysium limped through uncharted territories, evading ambushes and encountering new technologies designed to thwart even the most experienced fleets. Despite the mounting pressure, Rowe kept her crew focused. Her voice was steady, her resolve unwavering. We're heading into the storm, she said, looking out across the bridge. And there's only one rule here: we make it through, or we go down fighting. The crew nodded, each member carrying the weight of the mission but also an unspoken sense of camaraderie. For all their failures, their missteps, they had learned to trust the Elysium and each other. And then they reached it. The heart of the Xeno Collective's power. The structure known as the Black Vault, a colossal, floating fortress surrounded by an almost impenetrable field of gravity anomalies. The Omega Pulse was housed inside, shielded by layers of both advanced technology and the raw, destructive power of the Xeno's mastery over gravity. This is it, Rowe said, her voice steely, as she observed the Black Vault looming in front of them. Brace yourselves. The assault on the Black Vault was chaotic and brutal. As soon as the Elysium entered the perimeter, the Xenos activated the first layer of defense, massive, shifting gravity fields that distorted the very fabric of space around the ship. The Elysium was thrown into disarray as it was forced to navigate through impossible angles, its trajectory constantly warped by the shifting gravitational forces. It was as though the universe itself was trying to tear the ship apart. Keep it steady, Rowe shouted over the roar of systems failing and alarms blaring. Don't let up. The crew worked tirelessly, managing to stabilize the ship for brief moments only to be thrown into another dangerous warp of gravitational flux. Every move they made felt like a gamble, and each second felt like an eternity. They were fighting not just against the Xenos, but against space itself, and the Elysium, imperfect as it was, fought back like a creature of instinct. Weapons fired wildly at Xeno fighter crafts that darted in from all directions. But the ship's unpredictable movements and erratic patterns made it nearly impossible for the enemy to track. The Xeno vessels, too, were thrown into chaos as they tried to lock onto the Elysium. The tide had turned in an unpredictable way. But it wasn't enough. The gravity wells around the Black Vault grew stronger, dragging the ship closer and closer to the core, where the Omega Pulse lay in wait. We're running out of time, Lieutenant Valen shouted from the tactical station, her fingers flying across the screens. We've got to get to the core, or it's all over. Rowe looked at her crew, and for a split second, It seemed like the weight of the universe was bearing down on them. But then, she gave a small smile. Then let's go. With that, they activated the ship's last line of defense, a self-destructive pulse that would cause a catastrophic destabilization of the ship's core. It was a desperate plan, a last-ditch effort to disrupt the Omega Pulse, or at the very least, to delay its activation long enough for the fleet to regroup and neutralize the threat. The Elysium shot forward, its hull creaking under the immense pressure, its weapons system firing off every last round it could muster. It dove straight for the heart of the Black Vault, through the chaotic gravities, its trajectory now perfectly aligned with the core of the Xeno weapon. The crew's final mission, to disrupt the pulse before it could be unleashed. The explosion was blinding. For a moment, it felt as though time itself stood still. The Elysium, with all its flaws and imperfections, had achieved the impossible once more. The Omega Pulse was neutralized, and with it, the Xeno's final weapon. But in the end, it wasn't just the Elysium that had won the day, it was humanity. The spirit of humanity that refused to surrender, that defied the odds, that fought to the very last breath. As the wreckage of the Black Vault began to drift away, Rose's voice broke the silence on the bridge. We did it. The crew was silent for a moment, exhausted but triumphant. The Elysium had done what no one else could. It had survived. It had won. And humanity's future, though uncertain, was still intact. The Elysium may have been a ship built from scraps, a vessel that was never meant to survive, let alone win, but it had done both. It had become a symbol of humanity's refusal to be conquered by perfection, by technology, or by even the most insurmountable foes, and in the end, that imperfection had been its greatest strength. And no force in the galaxy, no matter how powerful, how perfect, could ever stop it. The end of the beginning. The Elysium might have been down for repairs, but its legacy was far from over. Humanity had learned something vital, that no matter how wrong everything was, nothing could ever stop them from pushing forward. The Elysium had not just been a ship, it had been a testament to the human will, and that will would carry them through whatever came next. The Elysium reborn, humanity's resurgence. Months had passed since the Elysium's final victory against the Omega Pulse, and the galaxy was slowly beginning to heal. The Xeno Collective had been forced to retreat to the farthest reaches of space, their formidable weaponry broken, their fleets scattered. The Elysium, though battered and scarred, had once again proven that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their technology or their perfection, but in their unyielding spirit. However, as peace began to settle over the galaxy, new whispers began to surface in the darkest corners of space. Rumors spoke of a new faction, an unknown entity far more dangerous than the Xeno Collective could ever hope to be. A force that wielded not just military might, but also knowledge of the very fabric of space and time itself. The Elysium had earned its place as humanity's most celebrated and feared vessel, but it was no longer enough. The stakes were higher than ever before. Commander Amanda Rowe stood at the command chair once more, her eyes tracing the map of the galaxy on the main display. The colors of the map shifted in real time, marking human colonies, alliance fleets, and the scattered remains of the Xeno Collective. For all the victories, the war was far from over. Rowe, we've received new intel, said Lieutenant Reyna Vallon, approaching with a data pad in hand. This is bigger than we thought. Rowe's brow furrowed as Vallon laid the pad on the table. The contents revealed something unsettling, an anomaly in deep space, far beyond the borders of the known galaxy. A massive energy signature that wasn't just unknown, but actively hostile. They're not Xenos, Vallon continued, tapping the display to highlight the signature. These readings don't match anything we've encountered before. It's almost predatory. Predatory? Rowe echoed, her voice sharpening with concern. Vallon nodded. They're targeting human space, and they're coming from every direction, as though they already know our weaknesses. Whoever they are, they've been watching us. Rowe clenched her fists, a mix of anger and determination rising in her chest. She knew the universe was vast, and there were countless threats out there waiting to take advantage of any weakness. But this was different. This felt like a true reckoning. We'll be ready, Rowe said firmly. Prepare the Elysium. We're going after them. The Elysium was far from its prime. It had taken a beating over the years, but it had always managed to pull through. This time, however, the mission was unlike any before it. They weren't just dealing with another Xeno faction or rogue pirates. No, this was something entirely new, and that made them even more dangerous. The crew was ready, each member resolute in their role. They had fought together through every impossible situation, and now they faced the unknown once more. "We've got no intel on these enemies," Valen said as the ship prepared to jump into the unknown. "All we know is they've been following us, watching us. We've faced enemies that thought they knew us," Ro replied, voice calm but fierce. "But they've underestimated one thing, our ability to adapt. They'll make the mistake of thinking we're the same as we were yesterday, and that's where they'll lose." The Elysium entered the anomaly zone, the surrounding space distorting in ways that made even the ship's advanced sensors buzz with confusion. Every light, every sound, felt off as they drew closer to the source of the anomaly. The ship's AI, Crispin, began to report odd data. "This isn't just an anomaly," Crispin said, its voice filled with something that might have been concern if an AI was capable of that. "The fabric of space here is unstable. We're looking at a pocket of reality itself being warped. Not just gravity or energy, something else entirely." The crew fell silent, but Ro's eyes hardened. "They've been toying with something they don't fully understand," Ro said grimly. "We're going in, full speed ahead." As the Elysium drew closer to the source of the anomaly, a sudden pulse of energy swept over them, jarring the ship's systems. A deep, resonating hum filled the air, and the starry backdrop was replaced by an eerie, distorted scene, an endless ocean of swirling blackness, broken only by the occasional flicker of strange, shimmering lights. And then they appeared. Massive, angular ships, sleek and black, almost formless, with energy patterns that defied conventional physics. Their designs seemed both alien and unnervingly familiar, as though they were born from the very fabric of the universe itself. They didn't belong to any known species, and their presence wasn't just a threat, it was a signal. "Contact," Valen shouted. "They're closing in fast." The ships didn't communicate in any way the crew understood. Instead, they sent a ripple through space, a surge of energy that sent the Elysium tumbling through space, its systems beginning to shut down. "Ro, there," Crispin started, but before the AI could finish, the Elysium was hit with another pulse, this one far more destructive. Systems failed across the ship, alarms blaring as power drained. "Hold on," Ro barked, gripping the command chair with both hands as the ship spun out of control. She knew what had to be done. There was no way to fight these enemies on equal footing, not without first understanding their power. They were manipulating space itself, and their control over reality made them unstoppable, at least, on the surface. But if there was one thing humanity was good at, it was turning the tables. "We're fighting an enemy that warps reality, that manipulates the very rules of space," Ro said as the crew struggled to maintain control. "They think they're above us, that we're nothing but ants in the face of their power. But I've learned something in all these years. The universe may be chaotic, but it's never unbeatable. It's just about finding the right chaos to unleash." Crispin's systems flickered back to life, and the ship stabilized, just enough for Ro to plot a course through the heart of the enemy fleet. "Get me a weapons readout," Ro ordered, her eyes flashing with determination. Reyna Valen didn't hesitate. "We're about to turn their own weapons against them." The Elysium's guns roared to life once more, its seemingly erratic trajectory now a deadly, unpredictable dance. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't efficient, but it was exactly what the enemy didn't expect. In the heart of the chaos, the Elysium unleashed a series of strikes, distracting, confusing, and overwhelming the enemy's control over space. Every weapon fired had an element of randomness, a deviation from what the enemy had calculated. And it worked. For every strike, for every pulse of energy, the enemy faltered, confused, unable to adapt. They had never encountered anything like the Elysium. It was a vessel that couldn't be predicted, a symbol of everything that was chaotic and wild about humanity's spirit. And for the first time since the war began, the new enemy wavered. The battle raged on, but the Elysium had found its rhythm once more. Ro's plan was working, each pulse of the ship's energy interfered with the very fabric of the enemy's control. It wasn't a perfect victory. There was still so much they didn't know about their new enemies. But one thing was clear, the Elysium and humanity had once again done the impossible. As the last of the strange ships fell into the void, Rose stood tall, her heart pounding with adrenaline. The battle had been won. For now. The crew of the Elysium gathered around. Battered but not broken. Humanity had proven once more that even the most improbable forces couldn't break them. "All right, team," Rose said, her voice tired but resolute. "Let's get some rest. This fight isn't over. But today, we showed them that no matter what the universe throws at us, we'll find a way." The Elysium Ascendant, humanity's unyielding legacy. The war with the mysterious, reality-warping enemy was far from over. The Elysium had triumphed once again, but Commander Amanda Rowe knew the battle had only just begun. Their enemies were relentless, manipulating space itself to their will, and every encounter with them left more questions than answers. But humanity was a force unlike any other. The crew of the Elysium had proven that time and time again. Yet, despite their successes, Rowe could feel a growing unease in her gut. The galaxy was still on edge. The remnants of the Xeno Collective had begun regrouping in the outer sectors, perhaps hoping for a second chance after their own defeat. And now, these new enemies, whoever they were, had shattered the fragile peace they'd fought so hard to maintain. The stakes were rising. The Elysium drifted in the quiet of deep space, its crew recovering from the harrowing battle. Their repairs were coming along, but there were limits to what even their unmatched ingenuity could patch together. Rose stood at the helm, watching the stars outside the viewport with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the infinite darkness. "Rowe," Crispin's voice crackled through the calms. "We've got a priority message incoming. Secure line." "Put it through," Rowe replied, voice steady, though she could already sense the urgency behind the message. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing Admiral Lucas Kale of the United Earth Alliance. His stern expression seemed to carry the weight of the galaxy. "Commander Rowe," the Admiral began, his voice grave, "we've intercepted a transmission from an unknown source. It's a warning." Rowe's eyebrows arched. "A warning?" "The new enemy we've encountered, they're not acting alone," Kale continued. "We've detected another faction, much larger, much older. They've been in the shadows for centuries, manipulating galactic events from behind the scenes, and now they've made their move." Rowe's heart sank. "What do we know about them?" "Not much yet," Kale admitted. "But we do know this: they're known as the Architects, and they've been planning humanity's downfall for millennia." "The Architects?" Rowe echoed. "Who are they?" Kale's expression darkened further. "They were believed to be nothing more than myth, ancient beings who designed the very laws of reality and the foundations of space. It seems, however, that they're more than just a story. They've been manipulating galactic power structures for eons, and now they're coming for us." Rowe clenched her jaw. The universe was a vast, unforgiving place. But this was something different. If the Architects were behind everything, the Xeno Collective, the warping of reality itself, they were facing an enemy on a scale humanity had never imagined. "Where do we go from here?" Rowe asked, already knowing what Kale's response would be. "You're the best we've got, Commander. The Elysium is humanity's last line of defense. I'm sending you coordinates to their last known location. We need to know what we're dealing with before it's too late." Rowe nodded, resolve hardening. "Understood, Admiral. We'll get there as fast as we can." As the transmission ended, she turned to face her crew, her gaze meeting their determined eyes. The Elysium had seen countless battles, had fought against impossible odds, but this threat, it was something beyond anything they'd ever faced. And yet, despite the overwhelming darkness, Rowe knew one thing: they would not go down without a fight. "All right, everyone," Rowe said, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "We've got our orders. We're heading into the heart of the storm, and we're going to find out who these Architects are. Stay sharp, stay focused, and remember, no matter what, we're human, and that means we always find a way." The Elysium surged forward through the galaxy's unexplored reaches, its engines pushed to the limit. Rowe stood at the helm, the map of the unknown sector glowing before her, as the crew worked tirelessly, repairing and upgrading the ship's damaged systems. The tension in the air grew palpable. Everyone knew that this mission could very well be their last, and no one spoke of the possibility of failure. Lieutenant Reyna Vallon approached, looking at Rowe with a glint of resolve in her eyes. "We've been through hell before, Commander, but this is different. These Architects, they're not just another enemy. They're an existential threat. Ro gave a small nod. I know, but they've underestimated us before, and they will again. The ship passed through the outer edge of the system, entering the vast, eerie blackness that surrounded the architect's stronghold. The stars were dim here, muted by the force of their hidden presence. Gravity anomalies bent the light in strange ways, casting long shadows where none should be. The very space around them felt wrong. Crispin, Ro called out. Any sign of them? Negative, Commander, Crispin responded, its voice unusually somber. But I'm picking up fluctuations in the fabric of space. They're close. Stay on alert, Ro ordered, her eyes narrowing as they neared the heart of the anomaly. This could get ugly fast. Then, it came, a massive rupture in space, a distortion so intense that the Elysium was rocked to its core. The ship's alarms blared as gravity wells spiraled out of control, pulling the Elysium in every direction. It was like being trapped inside a massive whirlpool of dark energy. Hold on, Ro shouted as the ship's hull groaned under the pressure. We're not losing this. The crew scrambled to stabilize the ship, fighting against the powerful force warping the very fabric of space. Reyna worked frantically at the controls, her hands a blur of motion. We've got it. Stabilizing, but just barely. The chaos subsided, but the Elysium was now in the midst of a vast, cosmic citadel. It was massive, impossibly so, its architecture unlike anything seen before. Monumental spires of black metal stretched into the void, resonating with a strange, otherworldly energy. The structure seemed to pulse with life, as if it were a living, breathing thing. And there, floating at the center of this immense structure, was a figure. Its form was ethereal, part organic, part mechanical, a towering, godlike presence, the architects themselves. The being's voice echoed across the vast expanse of the citadel, reaching the Elysium's crew through the ship's speakers. It was a sound that reverberated deep within their bones, an unsettling harmony that seemed to twist their thoughts. You are too late, humans, the voice said. We have shaped the galaxy for eons, and now, it is time for your kind to be erased. You are but a fleeting mistake in the design of the universe. Ro stood tall, her gaze unwavering. We're not going anywhere. We may not understand your design, but we know one thing, humanity fights. And no matter what you throw at us, we'll never stop. The architect's voice grew colder, more detached. You cannot fight what has already been written. This galaxy, this reality, it was all designed by us. Ro's hand gripped the command chair. Then we'll rewrite it. You may have controlled reality, but we've always had one thing you can't predict, chaos. The Elysium fired its weapons, not with precision, but with the wild unpredictability that had carried it through every battle. This time, they wouldn't rely on conventional tactics. They would fight the architects on their own terms, by breaking every rule they had set. The battle was fierce. The Elysium danced through the chaos, striking at the heart of the architect's citadel, disrupting their control over space and time. For every weapon the Elysium unleashed, the architects retaliated with devastating power, warping reality itself. But no matter how overwhelming their forces, the Elysium would not back down.